Self-Forgiveness, a heuristic study of the lived experience of forgiving oneself by Diana Smith. Anger and depression often result from an inability to forgive an interpersonal transgression. Forgiveness of self and others has shown to improve mental and physical health in issues such as depression, anxiety, self-alienation, precursory ideas, schizophrenic traits, social desirability, self-esteem, and more. Forgiveness has been found to be an appropriate goal for therapeutic interventions. Unfortunately, many therapists value the goal of forgiveness, but they lack the specific knowledge of how best to facilitate the process of forgiveness in therapy. A review of the literature demonstrated that there has been a surge in forgiveness research in the past 20 years. The focus has primarily been on forgiveness in relation to others, and there continues to be a need for a better understanding of the forgiveness process. A relatively unexplored aspect of forgiveness was self-forgiveness. This study was bound by individuals who had experienced genuine self-forgiveness, which involves a transformation from a painful experience to the healed version of self-love. Unlike forgiveness of others, where there is an event that triggers a need for forgiveness, the need for self-forgiveness may be unknown, much like a cancer that grows undetected. The purpose of this dissertation was to gain a better understanding of the lived experience of self-forgiveness, which asked the question, what is the lived experience of becoming self-forgiving? A qualitative thematic analysis of the data provided a list of themes and patterns as the researcher gained a better understanding of the process of self-forgiveness and how this process transformed the lives of the researcher and 8 co-researchers. 3 major categories emerged. A. The role of the chrysalis. B. The process of self-forgiveness. And C. Dynamics of transformation. The process of self-forgiveness described by the researcher and co-researchers is very similar to the process of transforming from a caterpillar into a butterfly. The role of the chrysalis marks the beginning of the dance with death. The chrysalis is the hard shell that protects the pupa during this difficult transformation as the individual faces their early memories and beliefs that cause them so much pain. Not unlike the caterpillar, the transformation process can be filled with times of darkness and grief as one lets go of the only life the caterpillar has known to become a butterfly. The researcher and co-researchers described a time when they experienced a crisis of the soul and lost the desire to live the life they had known. The equalizing forces of death and life ignited the transition that released the past and brought forward a desire for new ideas, beliefs, and dreams for their lives. It was during this time of the chrysalis that the participants were forced to let go of old ideas, beliefs, and desires, which required a process of surrender. During the time of surrender, they described a sense of being reborn. The price of facing the pain was intense change. This change brought the rhythm of life back by exhaling the past trauma and inhaling the many gifts of this new life. Breathing became stabilized as the participants embraced the gifts this process brought to them. It took great courage to embrace the dark night of the soul as they approached the process of transforming into the individuated self that was intended to evolve due to the process of self-forgiveness. The new life as a butterfly emerged from darkness with God's grace, as a new consciousness, strong, beautiful, ready to learn to live this new life as a butterfly. With the wisdom that was intended to strengthen the butterfly to live in its new life comes gratitude for all of life, even the painful process of transformation. God's presence in our life was defined and represented in the quiet moments of meditation as we gained an understanding of our process and learned from those times of transformation how to love and live as a butterfly, freely. The self-forgiveness process allowed the participants' past trauma to remain in the past and live life in the present with love. Suffering was viewed as purposeful and necessary, which allows for honoring the life of the caterpillar, but not being limited to the past life. The role of the chrysalis. Theme 1, Dark Night of the Soul, is the first step in the self-forgiveness process. In this, the first pattern was a loss of control. There was something within me that I could not control, and it controlled me. My life was unmanageable. Pattern 2, hitting rock bottom. I just couldn't stand the pain. I wanted to die. Pattern 3, beating myself up, me thinking I am stupid, I am worthless, I am not good enough, I am not smart enough. I hated myself. Theme 2, the social echo, came from places like their parents, teachers, religions, and society at large, as well as their own interpretation of who they thought they should be. Pattern 1 was religious conflict. I was born and raised Jewish. I ran away from the religion. Pattern 2, feeling unworthy. The only way for me to be happy was to be perfect. Pattern 3, setting intentions for forgiveness. I started to make the decision that I wanted to get better. Pattern 4, spirituality as a catalyst for self-forgiveness. I never prayed before. And get down on my hands and knees and pray. Pattern 5, reconnected. Some people call it meditation. I call it prayer. And it is the reconnecting with the source, with the ultimate source of that love. Theme 3, profound self-transformation, occurs when an individual has decided to seek transformation from the victim position of their misery to embrace the lessons of their experience so they can release the pain and transform by listening to their inner voice. Pattern 1 is the inner working, which involves seeking teachers to guide us out of the dark night of the soul because we cannot find our way in the darkness. Pattern 2 is healing, which is a process that involves a willingness to face the pain of the past and feel the impact. Pattern 3, letting go of anger. I just finally realized that holding on to that hurt is not helping me at all. That is when I kind of decided it is time to just let it go. Pattern 4 is clarity. You were blind to it, but then when the process happens and the lightness occurs, and then you see. B, the role of self-forgiveness allows one to let the past trauma remain in the past and live life in the present instead of projecting the pain into the future. Theme 4 is self-forgiveness, which is a process of letting oneself off the hook of self-punishment. The first pattern is a rebirth, and it came when I asked God for forgiveness, and I really felt that I was born again. Pattern 2 was total acceptance, which came when we are truly humbled. That is when we really do admit the truth of who we are and that facade is gone, which leads to total acceptance and surrender to what is and realizing that everything that has happened in my life was a gift and an experience that I had to go through to become who I am. Pattern 3 is freedom. There are no chains that limit me. There are no more excuses. Pattern 4, emotional self-regulation, allows for stability and control over my life choices. I have joy and my health is coming back. C, the dynamics of transformation. I do not live in fear so much. I have faith and I am not alone, and that there is a power greater than me. I find myself able to accept love and to offer love more easily. Theme 5 is ability to receive love is a significant indication of healing. Those of us who are wounded tend to isolate and disconnect from intimacy. Pattern 1, search for identity after trauma. I had to become willing to let go of the old perceptions to allow the new possibilities to grow. Pattern 2 is empowerment. which is a process of being able to make more life-affirming choices. Pattern 3 is the ability to love oneself, which comes from allowing myself to be loved by others. And pattern 4, love others. I was starting to get my needs met by being of service, helping other people in the program. Theme 6, continued growth. The process of self-forgiveness is not completed until this life is completed. Pattern 1 is evolving, an ongoing process of growing and learning and dying and rebirth. Pattern 2 is continued healing. The healing continued as the co-researchers shared their stories. The wounds were not forgotten, and neither was the gift of love. Theme 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 do not happen in a linear fashion. They happen in a circular fashion, not one necessarily followed by the other. They are all important and they all impact the other. The phoenix represents the miraculous process of death and rebirth, which demonstrates the qualities of a transformative life. Much like the phoenix, self-forgiveness requires the courage and strength to face the pain of the individual's past as they walk into the flames of hell, dying, and then rising from the ashes, reborn, so that they can live again, stronger and wiser. Jung described this process as follows. Nature herself demands a death and a rebirth, whether we like it or not, and whether we know it or not. These processes develop considerable psychic effects. In the perplexity and anguish of his self-chosen prison, which he had deemed a refuge, he is transformed into a being akin to the gods. Inner transformation and rebirth into another being. This other being is the other person in ourselves, that larger and greater personality maturing within us, whom we have already met as the inner friend of the soul. The heuristic method facilitated an understanding of the process of forgiveness of self and others. This study demonstrated how the self-forgiveness process produced a transformation from a discouraged, depressed, and anxious individual to a lifestyle of emotional stability. The equalizing forces of death and life ignited the transition that released the past and brought forward a desire for new ideas, beliefs, and dreams for their lives. The price of facing the pain was intense change. This change demonstrated the rhythm of life as they moved through the difficult developmental stages and were transformed by allowing the pain to consume them, exhaling the past trauma, and inhaling the many gifts of this new life. Breathing and living became stabilized as participants embraced the gifts this process brought to them. Profound self-transformation occurred when the researcher and co-researchers decided to seek freedom from the victim mentality. The misery was represented by the hell created in the participants' mind, their lives and their relationships as they continued to beat themselves up for the mistakes of their past. The self-inflicted experience of hell was a result of abandonment. Abandonment of God, family, society, and self was demonstrated in attempting to live according to the social expectations, or social echo. Self-forgiveness is seen as a therapy for the soul, or the quest for the butterfly. This process is experienced as the individual experiences internal pain and becomes more self-conscious. It is the internal pain that directs attention to the self and leads to comparison and results in objective self-awareness. The interaction of these influences can manifest in psychological phenomena of feeling, thinking, and motivation, and more complex behaviors can result from the process of self-forgiveness. For example, the idea of perfection as the ultimate goal can lead to high expectations of oneself and can result in feeling like a failure, no matter how much one has succeeded. Self-forgiveness is the process of letting oneself off the hook of self-punishment and self-sabotage. This process allowed for cognitive and emotional processing that resulted in a catharsis as the pain that was inflicted in the past was recalled and experienced so that the trauma was grieved and healed, which resulted in the ability to integrate meaning and wisdom into the current choices of life. Creating a more forgiving lifestyle comes from realizing that it is time to quit beating myself up. It is time to quit using it as an excuse, to really admit I screwed up. This researcher believes that the ability to reinterpret past trauma allowed individuals to choose to let go of anger and hurt and increase their ability to express social interest towards oneself and others, which is similar to the forgiveness process. This idea is further supported by Enright, who writes in his book, The Forgiving Life, that we must go beyond practicing forgiving and we must live a forgiving life until it becomes a part of us. Enright presents a theory that all people need to give and receive love and have psychological healthy relationships with family and community. Future research is needed on individuals with a more diverse background. Individuals who have experienced self-forgiveness with different religious, cultural, social, economic backgrounds, as well as individuals under the age of 30. It would also be useful to develop qualitative research that can determine the approximate number of people who have gone through the process of self-forgiveness and the approximate number of people who feel the need to forgive themselves. Future research should also attempt to correlate the felt need for self-forgiveness with mental health issues such as depression and anxiety to determine if they are related.